You talked about how you started dissecting, analyzing, consuming, but then repackaging something for yourself. And there's a very mature process here around, like, imitation is a bit of a compliment. There's a lot of lessons you can shortcut your way to some success. And I'd be curious to know, what are some of the key things you took when you were at the beginning stages? Like, there were things you're like, oh, I could do a podcast. I've seen this. I've seen others do this. Maybe I can make a version of that. What were some of the initial things you started noticing and saying, I can take a piece of that were really relevant to building up what you have now?
Yeah, so one of the big things internally that came through, and this is a bit of more of a soft science and a hard skills thing, was watching people even through the interview, but I couldn't help but reflect upon the fact that people's biggest challenges, if they learnt how to master that, became their biggest gift. And it's the hero's journey, right? And I think everybody's familiar with that. But I just saw it again and again and again and again. And it's a really powerful mental model to have, right? Because, I'm sure, like, for all of us, we go through challenges, but it's just got to get through this. But if you can just float up for just a second, kind of go, yeah, I'm getting through this. But if I just take a little bit of stock in terms of what's getting me through this, I could potentially support others through this shift and transformation as well, right? So it's almost turning that pain into potential. So that was the soft science of, like, I know I'm going through like this massive challenge right now, but the second time around with the Inspired Evolution, I was able to harness it a little bit better, because I remembered, like, I had to go through depression to become a meditator and a meditation teacher, right? Like, had I not gone through that, like, and then so the second time around I was a bit more aware that, like, I know I'm going through a really challenging time, and a dear friend of ours, Vishen, always talks about, is like, I know I'm going through challenges because, the universe has put these on in my way, but I know I'm going to be better on the other side of it. So that same sort of conversation echoing around here. So that was the soft side of it, because it was like, I know I'm going through something, and something's actually going to unlock, like, where to from here, right? So that's quite empowering for me. I feel compelled to share this actually a little bit, but I'm conscious of how much time we have today. But actually, at the time of the podcast, I didn't really want to set up a podcast. The podcast actually started with, I was hosting every fortnight people coming over to my house for a gathering. I'd given up alcohol. I went on a journey through South America. Many transformative experiences occurred. And one of the things that sort of popped out of the other side was like this alcohol-free Amrit. And when I came back home, Friday night drinks was one of my favorite things after work with mates. And so now I was like, I'm still social, I'm still me, but I don't drink. And I had this moment where, and this is when Kay went and she was on her sabbatical, and this is when she went to Mindvalley University amongst that sabbatical. But at the beginning of that sabbatical, I had this moment, I was watching a Tony Robbins video, and I turned to her. She's normally on the couch and I'm on the dining room table. And I was like, yo, I just had a break. Hello? Oh, she wasn't there. And so I had this moment where I was like, surely other people feel the same. And I was like, I'm just going to open my house up every fortnight to people. I'm going to call it I don't know, I had an epiphany, mandala. Okay, mandala moments. I spiraled in on myself. I'm going to call it mandala moments. The concept was chai chats and community. Now there's other chapters basically around Australia where people run their own mandala moments, but it was mandala moments, chai chats and community, people coming over every fortnight and us just shooting the shit on philosophy, spirituality, very organic. It's just something I wanted out of my own desire and need. And so I was doing that every fortnight. It was probably about 6 to 8 months in where people were like, these conversations that we're having here are incredible. Would you record them? Touch wood. And it wasn't that like I was just space holding, but everybody was talking. And it was like I only invited people that I was the average of the 5 people. I invited people that I was inspired by, right? Like my local yoga teacher, an entrepreneur, an author, not my usual sort of friends. Nothing wrong with them, but also at the same time, like they weren't, who I was inspired to become. So the idea was plug a mic into the circle. And I was like, look, we only really go to the depths in the conversations that we're having because they're not recorded. It's a safe container in many ways, right? So you can't, the mic puts in an energetic leak. And so I was like, that's not my vibe. I'm not doing that. But they're like, look, there are so many people that wouldn't come here for this gathering that could benefit from these conversations, according to my friends. And then I tuned into a few podcasts like Tim Ferriss at this time, like 8 years ago. Yeah, now podcasting has matured a lot as a platform. But even 8 years ago, it was already coming to a certain head, but Tim Ferriss was absolutely crushing it. And so listening to his podcast, but there is this essence of Tim Ferriss. He is the human guinea pig, but he's he's also an expert, right? Like this is very much, I'm a podcaster, I'm an expert, listen to me, sort of vibe. And for me, it was never, I'm an expert. I'm like, my vibe's like, I'm a perpetual student. Yeah. Like I'm just always learning, always growing. So for me, it was like, I don't really feel like I'm the expert on much. So I don't really feel called to do this podcasting thing. But long story short, my friends kept insisting. And then a mentor appeared who was like, hey, I want to beta test a program of launching a podcast. And my friends were like, do a podcast. And I realized the universe is sending signs. I'm just kind of in the way. And so I was like, you know what? I literally woke up 4 a.m. and just gave my credit card details to to the mentor. And I probably had to be that time in the morning. So my brain was kind of checked out. I was in that delta wave state, just allowed it to happen. And 8 weeks from there, I had a podcast called The Inspired Evolution. At the time, though, I was going through the dark night of the soul. I could have just as easily, I was actually looking to join Mindvalley to work for them. I wasn't really clear on working in Malaysia. I wasn't really interested in that. But you know how you had to film the video documentaries to sort of, not documentaries, but like a video test.
I've done it.
The video cover letter thing. I was like, mine's was going to be, I jumped out of a plane and as like take a film crew up with me, jump out of a plane and then say, hey, I'm really scared of heights, but I'm also really scared of like not living into my potential, and then jump out of the plane, land on the ground, go across and then like back to the fence line and just be like, hey, there's no jobs at Mindvalley at the moment that line up to what I want to do, but this is me embracing my fear and I know that there's a space for me there, and fast forward a little bit, ended up becoming Mindvalley, coach, trainer and all this sort of stuff. So the universe has its way, but it could have gone either way. It was either that or the podcast, but the podcast actually just caught my attention. So I was working on the podcast at the time. And so that was the birthplace of the podcast. I share that because sometimes we think it's super premeditated the way we're going, but also like life just presents its way with you as well. And if you're just tuning in and cluing in a little bit, like I was just like, okay, I really want to film that cover letter. Like I still to the day had the skydive booked, never cashed in on it, never went to it because I didn't film the cover letter, lost the investment in the skydive, right? But yeah, like I've got the podcast, and so that sort of happened, and that's been the journey for the last little while.
Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.